I think like the Rosetta heroes are a really big draw for a lot of the new players. I don't know if you guys have been feeling that, but I've basically been seeing a lot of people asking. Well, a lot of people are asking me about them, and that's kind of how I decide whether or not, like to talk about something. All right, let's talk about Florian. Florian is one of the Rosetta heroes, an elemental rune blade hero. Pretty popular with newer players, honestly. I've been seeing a lot of him pop up, a lot of questions about him. I think people like rune blades, and two, like the elemental stuff. I think it's I mean, I'm a fan. I started in Tales of Aria, which is where we first saw the elemental talent, and so I'm a huge fan. He's got a really cool effect where he says, if there are 8 or more Earth cards in your banish zone, Florian gets, if you would create 1 or more Aura tokens, instead create that many plus 1 of each of those tokens. The 2 main tokens that he makes are Runechant token and Embodiment of Earth, which I forgot to actually put pictures of. But Runechant token says when you attack, it deals 1 arcane damage. And Embodiment of Earth says when you block with a non-attack action, it gets plus 1 defense. Right, so if you make 1 Runechant, instead you make 2 Runechants, which literally doubles the damage. If you make an Embodiment of Earth, your 3-block non-attack blocks for 4. If you make 2, it blocks for 5, right? So turning on his ability is pretty powerful. Let's talk about his stats. All right, I gave Florian an initial difficulty of 2 out of 5. I think he's like not the most difficult. I think it's kind of easy to pick up. There's like a couple cards that are his power cards, and a lot of the other parts of his deck are kind of like fluff because you need a certain amount of Earth cards for the deck to like actually run so you could turn on his hero ability, right? I also gave him only 2 on difficulty to master, but honestly, I think I maybe could have given him like a 2.5. I don't think he's quite at a 3, but he's a little bit more difficult to master than he is just to pick up and play because a lot of his matchups go really, really long. And you need to understand how to properly navigate those endgames, especially because, like I mentioned before, most of your cards are not like powerful cards. They just fit the bill of what you need. So you only have so many cards that like really swing the game, being like Felling of the Crown, Plow Under is really good, Germinate's really good, right? Like those are the big ones. The trees, if you run those, we're going to talk about all these in a little bit. And you need to like properly ration out your resources. You know, if you block with all your Germinates, you're going to be really sad when your opponent just goes, oh, okay, I'll just block everything you do. Like, can you kill me? No. Bummer. You ran out of cards. I gave him 2 on the aggression scale, 2 out of 5. He's like, can't get that aggressive. He can only do so much damage. Like, he's not constantly just sitting here converting 5-card hands into pure damage. That's just not what Florian does. What he does do is he plays very, very, very good defense. As you'd expect, like an Earth hero to do. He's very strong on the back foot. He's got really good defensive tools. And not just that, his equipment is like, it's beautiful. He might have like the best equipment loadout in the game. Absolutely absurd. The Earth stuff and the Runeblade stuff combined is just nuts. So powerful. And you just get like, you get Rootbound Carapace, which for is your game plan. You have Disruption that isn't on hit. Like Felling of the Crown and Plow Under, you're going to hear about these two a lot, by the way, are so good at just forcing your opponent to play like on your level that I actually think they're more of a defensive tool than they are an offensive tool, right? Your opponent can never play with a 5-card hand if you cast Felling or Plow Under, which is very powerful. He does have some issues in the current meta, namely Illusionist. He gets kind of dog-walked by Enigma. You can make the Enigma matchup better. The issue is you have to sacrifice so many slots in order to like actually do so. That I'm just not sure if it's worth it. So I think like he's a 3 out of 5. I think he's a totally solid bring to anything. You're probably not going to win an event though. But like great armory level hero. If you want to like start spiking your nationals or whatever, you're probably going to have to pick something else. But he's pretty good. And once Mistveil heroes start rotating out, I think he starts inching up to the probably like 4 out of 5, maybe even 5 of 5 mark. He's pretty powerful against a lot of heroes. All right, let's talk about his playstyle a bit. So I wrote here that Florian looks to sacrifice early game power for late game potential when his hero power is turned on. And that's totally true. A lot of your cards just aren't super good until you get Earth cards in your graveyard so you can banish them. And then a lot of your cards don't get super good until after you already hit the threshold of eight or more Earth cards in the banish zone. So you're kind of like playing 2 games, right? You have to balance the resources of the amount of Earth cards that are in and out of your graveyard and banish zone, and then you have to like block with them. But they're also, a lot of them are your power cards, so you have to like know when it's okay to block with them, when it's okay to cast this even though it's not for full value, and that kind of stuff. That way, later, you can reap the benefits of the turned on hero power, right? Things like that. And you see that a lot if you watch people play Florian. They'll pitch stack their Germinates. They'll just pitch them instead of blocking with them because they're so powerful when the hero power is turned on, but they're not very good before then. You might, in aggressive games, you might want to block with them. When in control games, you might want to keep them. You almost have to keep them, which is why I said that Florian can be pretty difficult to master. He gets to play a lot of very powerful and disruptive Earth cards, and that's totally true. Again, we're going to talk about them a lot. Felling of the Crown and Plow Under are very, very, very strong cards that do something that like made Command and Conquer a $100 card, right? They're disruptive to your opponent. They're on rate, damage wise. But the real power comes in and like you can disrupt your opponent without disrupting yourself. Command and Conquer sends 6, and that's pretty cool, but they can always block it. Plow Under sends 6, but they can't block the effect. And it helps power you towards your hero power. Just very, very powerful stuff. Power. Lots of incidental life gain. Things like his Germinate, again, gains you life, right? He's got Prevention, which I like kind of lumped in there as life gain. But it's really tough to like knock out Florian. He's really sticky. He's a defense first, offense later type of playstyle. Again, you kind of want to think of Florian as like a 2-phase hero, where the first phase is like accumulating your resources, and then once you get turned on, your cards go from being like pretty good to being like really good. And so in the first half, when they're only pretty good, you kind of just want to like do some blocking. You want to chill out, and then later pivot, right? When you start casting your like, red card that gains you life and makes 4 rune chance, that's nuts, pretty good. Your games are going to go long. If that's not for you, that's okay. I, for one, prefer longer games. I like to be able to try to eke out advantages over the course of long games instead of just like blowing out my opponent in one really big turn. I know that sounds weird because I play Wizard, but it is what it is. Florian's pretty strong into aggressive decks, but he's weaker into decks that set up against you because he takes so long to actually turn on his hero power. It's pretty easy to just set up and blow him out. So decks like Enigma or Kano, almost more like Freljord. Yeah, I could see comparing him to Freljord. For decks like Enigma and Kano, that set up like their potions or that set up their wards, you just don't have the raw damage output out the gate to force them to play your game, right? They kind of get to do whatever it is that they want to do. And that is not how you win those matchups. So stronger into decks that want to keep like 5 cards, and that like, attack with 0/4s and things like that. He's got a lot of really good defensive tools. Really not great against Wizard and Illusionist. He's very adaptable outside of the core cards. Okay, so the Earth Heroes have this thing where like you basically have to play like 26 cards or 25 cards or whatever. You just have to play those 25 cards. It's just like the best Earth cards that you can play, plus your specializations, Felling, Plow, Germinate, Arcane Seeds. Like, you're just gonna play those. But everything outside of that can be completely adapted to whatever you want to play. You could play Florian in a more like ordinary mid-rangey plan, or you could play him in an OTK defensive plan, or you can put in Channel Mount Heroic and just like start swinging for the fences, right? You just put a bunch of attacks with Go-Agains and you just send it. You can do all these things. He's very flexible, which is cool because you could tune it based on what you think you're going to run into. Is your locals full of a lot of aggro players? Okay, well, play a more standard mid-rangey version with a lot of 0/4 defensive tools. Do all your opponents want to play setup decks? Well, then slam those Channel Mount Heroics and start casting Swarming Gloom Veils, right? Like, you can do what you want to do with the deck, which is really neat. He also prevents both physical and arcane damage, making it difficult to efficiently defend against. The Rune Chants are arcane. You have to pitch cards as resources in order to defend against them, and he sends big physical numbers. Felling attacks for 8, right? Like, that's big damage. So it's really tough to get the most value out of your cards on defense because of that. It also makes him a menace in late game states where he gets to pitch to his arm piece, make 2 rune chants, and swing Reaping Blade all with 1 blue. Let's talk about his important cards. Starting with Felling of the Crown. Base 4 attack, 3 defense, cost 3 red. Probably the best Earth card. It has, if there are 4 or more Earth cards in your banish zone, this gets +4. What a convenient thing of text, because we're trying to do that anyway, and when you know it, it does it for us. It has Decompose. When this attacks, you may banish 2 Earth cards and an action card from your graveyard. Now, just note, if you're not aware of this, it says 2 Earth cards and an action card. The action card can be another Earth card, right? So Plow Under is an Earth action card. So you can banish 2 Rootbound Carapace and 1 Plow Under, 2 Earth cards and an action card. And then you have 3 Earth cards in your banish zone. For those of you who are thinking one step ahead, Florian wants 8 Earth cards in banish zone in order to have his hero power activated. That means the minimum time that you can do it in is 3 instances of Decompose if you can get the amount of Earth cards in your graveyard. Normally it's going to take you 4. You're just going to go 2, 2, 2, 2, right? But you can do it in 3, probably like 40% of the time I feel like you do it in 3. But Felling gets +4 as long as you've decomposed twice, basically. And it says, when this attacks, you may decompose. If you do, each hero puts a card from their hand on the bottom of their deck. That's pretty powerful. But you're thinking, okay, it attacks for 8, and then we both put a card from our hand on the bottom of their deck. That's really good. You know, it's an 8 power attack, and then there's this even effect. But if you don't have a card in your hand, you don't have to put a card in your hand on the bottom of your deck because you don't have one. So if you just keep 2 cards, let's say you block with 2 cards, 6 points of blocking value. If you watch my how to block video, you know what I'm talking about. And then you can attack with Felling of the Crown. It attacks for 8. You say, whoops, don't have any cards in hand. Your opponent has to put a card from their hand on the bottom of their deck. That's at least 3 value of cards right there. So Felling of the Crown essentially attacks for 11 if it's turned on. Just absolutely bonkers good. It would be insane if it was 11 vanilla, but it's better because it disrupts your opponent as it does it. Absolutely nuts card. You just have to run 3. There's no getting around it. Plow Under is in the same vein as Felling. You'll see a lot of the same text. It needs 4 more Earth cards to get +4. Now, it's okay to cast these as your first Decompose. You just don't really want to. You want to do Rootbound Carapace, which we'll talk about, and I'll move my head out of the way in a second. But this has the same text. It only attacks for 2, 6 when it's online. It only costs 2. And it says, when this attacks, you can decompose. If you do, each hero puts a card from their arsenal on the bottom of their deck, like Command and Conquer, right? It's before they block. You're right. It is before they block, which matters a lot. And so it's kind of like Command and Conquer, except this doesn't have to hit. And if, I don't know, you don't have a card in your arsenal, it's a one-sided effect. And you just like take a card away from your opponent. Again, just these 2 cards are so much of Earth's power budget. It's insane. Let's talk about Germinate. Germinate is probably my favorite card in Florian. I think it's really neat. One, it's just so pretty. The border is gorgeous. I love the colors. It's a blue. I love blues. It's a non-attack. I love non-attacks. It does block for 3. A lot of these Earth cards do. You're playing every Earth block 3. That's like in good colors, by the way. There aren't many of them. And it has a cost of XX. What that means is that if you want X to be 1, you have to pay 2. If you want X to be 2, you have to pay 4 because they have to pay 2 and 2, right? Now this says create a rune chant or embodiment of Earth token. Repeat this process X more times, then you gain X plus 1. So if you cast it for 0, you would make 1 embodiment of Earth or 1 rune chant. You would repeat it 0 times. And then you would gain 0 plus 1 life. You gain 1 life. Not the best card, right? Worth like 2 to 3 value. However, once Florian is online, if you cast it for 0, you would make either 2 rune chants or 2 embodiment of Earths. And then you would gain 1 life. Because every time you create a rune and a token, he triggers and you make another one. Now, because of how this is worded, create a rune chant or blah, 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 repeat this process X more times. If I say pay 6 into this, so X would be 3, right? It will make a rune chant. Let's say I choose rune chants for all of them. It will make a rune chant and Florian will go, oh, you made a token. Let's make another one. So you make 2 rune chants and then you repeat it 3 more times, making 6 more rune chants. So you now have 8 rune chants and you gain 4 life. That's pretty good value. especially because late game, you can sit there and just stack up rune chants, and then you have 30 of them, and then you blast your opponent all at once. You will see that happen with Florian. A lot of people like to play specifically for just that kind of endgame scenario, which is kind of fun sometimes. Love Germinate, such a flexible card. It's also Earth, which is good for Decompose, and it's a non-attack action, which is really good for embodiments of Earth, and specifically one of your equipment pieces, which we'll talk about later. Now, let's talk about Rootbound Carapace. Earth decks don't actually work without Rootbound Carapace, like at all. It's kind of crazy. Remember you have to have 4 more Earth cards in your banish zone. This gets +4. Well, Rootbound Carapace is how you want to start it. You always want your first Decompose to be Rootbound Carapace. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way, but there's a reason why we play red and some yellows. It blocks for 3, the red one. It's a defense reaction, and it says you may banish 2 Earth cards and an action card from your graveyard. If you do this, it gets +1. So it blocks for 4, and it decomposes. Now, what you would like to do is get a couple Earth cards in your graveyard, block with this, decompose, and then send Felling or Plow under it, which are now at their full power after that. That is like your hope. A very important card in the Earth hero card pool, I guess. All right, let's talk about Plume of Evergrowth. This is not something that I mention elsewhere in any of the slides, so I just want to go over this card. I think it's a really cool card. This is a common. It blocks for 0. And it says, pay 3, destroy Plume of Evergrowth. Return target Earth action card or Earth instant card from your graveyard to your hand. I'm missing Seeds of Tomorrow here in the image, but you get it. Basically, what this does when you play it against decks that either don't attack you with a lot of physical damage or are looking to fatigue you, is that Plume is a toolbox. You can go and get whatever you need. Do you need to just push efficient damage? You can go grab Felling of the Crown. Do you need to set up for a big late game push because they're trying to fatigue you? Get Germinate. Did your opponent just play Manifestations of Mirror Guy? Get Summer's Fall and tuck that aura, right? Like, there's a lot of things that this allows you to do. It's super flexible. I love the toolbox nature of this card. I think Plume of Evergrowth is actually one of my favorite cards in the entire deck. You don't play it in most matchups, but it's such a cool and unique card. That I wanted to showcase it because I think it's fun. I want more cards like this. All right, his standard equipment. Like I mentioned, I think Florian has one of the best fridges. I don't know why we call equipment sets fridges, but we do. And let's talk about it. So, Face Purgatory. Blocks for 2 and then blows up. When this defends together with an attack action card and a non-attack action card, we have a pretty good split of like 20-30, I think, for this one. The attacking hero discards a card, and you draw a card. So you want to put this in front of a big attack, specifically if you think they're holding up Pummel or they're trying to keep something for their arsenal, right? If your brute opponent attacks with Swing Big for 8, you block with a 3-block, you block with another 3-block, you block with Face Purgatory, you draw a card, and they discard a card. It's just insane value, and if you can see the full art, it's so pretty. We have Grasp of the Arknight. It blocks 2, gets a -1 counter, and then blocks for 1, and then doesn't blow up. It stays around forever, unless you're playing against Jarl. And what it does is once per turn action, you can pay 2 resources to create a rune chant. Now, if Florian is active, you create 2 rune chants, which is really relevant. This ability costs an additional 1 to activate for each rune chant you control. Go again. Now, Florian, the standard version, plays Reaping Blade, which is a sword that attacks for 3 for 1 resource. What you can do is you can activate Grasp of the Arknight, make 2 rune chant tokens of Florian's on, and then attack for 3 physical. So you attack for 2 arcane and 3 physical off 1 blue. Incredibly efficient line that you're going to do a lot. Barkskin of the Millennium Tree is something I thought was good and then was honestly blown away by how much gooder it even was than I thought it was going to be. It blocks twice, once for 2, once for 1, and then it blows up. When this defends, if there are 4 more Earth cards in your banish zone, create an Embodiment of Earth token. Embodiment of Earth token, again, is the thing that makes your non-attack action block for 1 more. Any of your non-attack actions. If you block with 2 non-attack actions, they each block for 1 more. They block for 4 instead of 3, right? However, if Florian's online, you get 2 Embodiment of Earth tokens, which means your non-attack that blocked for 3 now blocks for 5. It's pretty common for me in the late game, especially against decks that have a lot of things with Go Again, to block with Barkskin, block with a non-attack for 5, block with a non-attack for 5, and just shut down their whole turn. Absolutely wildly powerful card. You can do that twice before it breaks. And then the last one is Well Grounded. Well Grounded blocks for 0, but it has an instant effect that says destroy this. Prevent the next 2 damage that would be dealt to you this turn. You can only do it if there are 4 or more Earth cards in your banish zone. You get like a mini power spike when you hit 4 or more Earth cards in your banish zone. But really, the way I play Florian, and the way I think most people should play Florian, is you basically never use any of your equipment until your hero power is online. And then you use your equipment to let you keep the hands that properly convert your hero power, right? Because you'll be halfway through the game by that point. You are going to want to, just use your equipment to keep good hands after your hero power is online than earlier in the game when you don't get as much value out of your cards. All right. Now, let's talk about a deck list. I put a little code over here, right there. You can see it. A little QR code that if you wanted to scan will actually bring you to the Fabrary link, the deck list for that I'm talking about. I don't know if that's useful at all. I just thought it'd be kind of fun. Otherwise, I will be pulling it up and showing you guys. But let's talk about Standard Florian. So Standard Florian plays like Reaping Blade, like I talked about, or Dread Scythe, attacking weapons. He plays a more standard mid-rangey plan. He wants to close games with split damage over time as opposed to one big push. Remember where I was talking about stacking up like 30 rune chants and then killing your opponent? That's not quite what he does here. He more like plays a little defensively and then kind of turns on the gas, right? And chips in, right? A couple 6 rune chants plus Felling of the Crown is going to get in some damage. And he just does that a couple of times. And then, like I said, with the split damage, it's just so tough to properly defend that he can force you to block inefficiently. And that's how he squeaks out the late game. You can use something like Channel Mount Heroic if you want to. He has a much better illusionist matchup than the full OTK defense, 1-turn kill defensive version, which we'll also go over. It's still not great, but much better. And he pivots from defense to offense and back multiple times per game. It's not just one, like, okay, I was defensive Florian, now I am offensive Florian. You kind of move around, right? You were defensive, now you have really good hands, so you're offensive. Okay, let's play this turn kind of defensively, and then we'll, wait for one of our power cards, and we'll switch back. That's kind of how this version of Florian operates. As you'll see, we have this standard equipment loadout, plus like Reaping Blade. We have a lot of the normal stuff. We have things like Enlightened Strikes, right? We have Swarming Gloomveils. And I am going to play games of this live after. This is what we're going to be jamming. Just, a bunch of non-attack blues. It's very like standard stuff. We have some more block 4s. We have some more disruptive attacks, right? We have Seeds of Tomorrow. It's just like, just good shit. It's just good stuff. How do you beat Viserai? I don't have a great answer for you. And yeah, this is what the standard Florian deck kind of looks like, right? Okay. Moving on. Some tips playing standard Florian. If you want to pick up the deck, this is the version I recommend you play, by the way. Not the one I'm going to talk about in a second. Play this one. It's better. Okay. Some tips playing the deck. Decompose doesn't need to be rushed. It's okay if you're slower. He can absorb pressure really well. And, oh, hey, Jeremiah. Florian is very good at playing on the back foot while he sets up. Very, very good at it. Again, like I said, you can sit there. You got a lot of block 4s. You want to get Earth cards into your graveyard anyway, and the most efficient way to get cards in your graveyard is just to block with them. So he's very good at blocking early. Don't be afraid to don't feel like you have to rush it, right? You can block with that first Felling. You can block with that first Plow Under if it's not quite working out. Don't take a ton of damage to send an attack when you're not ready to start switching to that more offensive role in the game. You usually want your first Decompose to be Rootbound Carapace, like I talked about, but it's okay if you send a Felling for 4, right? It's fine. It's still a good card. Generally, you want to trade efficiently and play small hands. Outside of a few hands, Florian can't use the grip efficiently. This all, by the way, I asked Vishra Barrett, because he's been playing a lot of Florian, and I was like, hey, give me like four bullet points about how to play this Florian deck, so I'm not just making it up. Because I played a lot of Florian, but not in the last like month or so. This is mostly his words. Yeah, so he usually wants to play like some good 2-card hands. Hey, Oliver, how you doing? He wants to play just like blue plus Felling of the Crown, right? Just Plow Under. Maybe you keep your arcane seeds to push through some arcane damage and stuff. You want to be blocking with some of your hands basically every single time. You almost never want to be saying, yeah, I'll take it. Here's my 5-card hand, because like it's so hard for you to convert 5 cards offensively. Channel the Millennium Tree and Germinate are best used as game closers that go over / punch through opposing defenses. Try to save them for later in the game if you can. In a fast matchup, Germinate turn 0 is a big edge. Okay, let's talk about that first half. Because you're slow setting up and you're going to block a lot, you won't have all of your big power tools, right? You likely won't have all your Germinates, your Arcane Seeds, your Fellings. You probably won't have all of them for the late game. And because of that, if your opponent pushes you too far in the beginning of the game and you give up too many power cards, they can pivot to a much more defensive role and fatigue you because you just don't have enough damage. And that's where things like Channel the Millennium Tree, which amps 3 every turn, and Germinate, which can build you a ton of rune chant, really come in handy. So when you're playing Florian, you want to keep in mind what you have available and what you have left. And you need to kind of like weigh how efficient they are to use now versus how much you'll need them for the rest of the game, right? Like maybe it's really good to block with this Germinate, but this is your last copy of Germinate. You're playing against New and she's at 22. It might be really tough for you to get over the top without it. Just things you need to consider when you play the deck. Vischer thinks he's the most adaptable hero in CC. Like I mentioned, core of the deck is about 25 cards, and you can adapt to an expected meta or your local meta or anything like that. You really have like a lot more of a toolbox than I initially gave the deck credit for. You can play a bunch of block 4s. You can play a bunch of more offensive 2-cost attacks. Play Tunic and Pummel if you really wanted to. Like, there's just a lot of ways that you can kind of navigate your deck. Yes, you have to play a certain amount of cards that are just like gonna be in your deck every time. Felling, Plow, Germinate, Arcane Seeds, Autumn's Touch Blue. They're just gonna be in the deck. But outside of that, you have a lot of options. Like I mentioned before a few times, you want your first Decompose to be Rootbound Carapace, but it's okay if you don't get full value from your first Felling or Plow. It's okay if your Plow only attacks for 2, if it starts getting your Decompose that you really need. It's okay if it keeps your, Fi opponent off 5 cards. Like, it's okay. It's not ideal, but it's fine. As long as you're not taking too much damage to send it. Let's talk about OTK Florian. Again, I made a little QR code. Let me know if that's even like something you guys use or if it's just completely superfluous. I don't know. So OTK Florian plays to stack rune chants and wants to kill their opponent in one really big swing. He does this through several different ways. One, he basically never attacks. Because if you attack, it triggers the rune chants. And you don't want to do that. Because if you stack enough of them, your opponent can only block so many of them because you can only have 4 cards per turn, right? So instead of attacking, you play very, very defensively. Lots of defense reactions. You're not keeping 2 cards to send attacks. You're just keeping cards to stack chance. He plays better into most mid-range decks, but worse into Illusionist. Turns out when you're completely focused on only blocking, you do a really, really good job of it. You cannot beat Enigma, though. It's like a literal buy for them. You're never going to win. You're probably not ever going to beat a wizard. Like, you're just giving up some matchups. He plays Scepter of Pain instead of a traditional weapon because, again, if you swing a weapon like Reaping Blade, it pops your chance, and you don't want that. He uses things like Thistle Bloom Life, which is a really cool card, to help stack rune chants, and then Ninth Blade of the Blood Oath to push a big bunch of damage over the top without needing to keep a bunch of cards. And then I put, don't play until Enigma rotates out. It will suck, and I stand by that. Let me go ahead and pull up this deck list for you so you guys can see kind of what it looks like, though. Again, I highly do not recommend playing this version. But here's the Scepter. Once per turn to action, you can pay this, deal 1 arcane damage, create a rune chant for each damage dealt. It goes really well with Channel the Millennium Tree, which amps. So if you deal 4 damage with your Scepter of Pain, you make 4 rune chants. As you'll see, there's a lot different cards going into this, right? We have things like Amplify the Arcanite. We have Malefic Incantation. Reduce to Rune Chant is really good for stacking chants, right? Once Florian's online, you reduce, you make 2 rune chants. That's really, really, really good. And then here's the big winner, Thistle Bloom Life. Create X rune chant tokens where X is the total life you've gained this turn. Gain 1 life. So if you only cast this card, you'll gain 1. and then you'll make 2 chance. That's not great. But if you combine it with something like Sigil of Solace, right, or CYB or Fruits of the Forest, you could do a lot of really interesting stuff with it. Just it's a cool deck. It's a really cool deck. Again, don't play this one. If you want to bring this to your armory, go ahead. I just don't think you should really be bringing it anywhere else. I think it's pretty bad. Moving on. Let's talk about cards that can be cut for budget. Flesh and Blood's really expensive right now. I'm not gonna lie to you. But a lot of the cards you don't actually have to have. Warmonger's Diplomacy is probably the worst bang for your buck at the current moment. I don't know if people will disagree with me. They might, but like Warmonger should be really good because it's like $90 a copy, and it's just not that good. It is usually just a blue 3-block non-attack that's like not even relevant in most of your matchups. It hoses like a couple decks, like Azalea, that it's kind of whatever. Honestly, like you can cut it. Just play any other blue 3-block. There's a bunch of Runeblade cards you can play. No big deal. Weakest Link's also like $80 a pop. And you can replace that with any other disruptive attack. You can replace that with more defensive options. You can replace that with more earth cards, right? Like you can replace that with more equipment if you wanted more stuff. There's just other things you can do. Weakest Link is a really, really good card. But again, you don't have to have it. And at $80 a pop, I'd rather you spend your money on Felling and Plow Unders than Weakest Link, right? I think you could get a Felling and a Plow Under for as much as a Weakest Link, or at least close. Enlightened Strike is really nice. I'm not going to lie to you. Enlightened Strike and Swarming Gloomveil kind of go together. E-Strike's like 50 each, and Swarming's like 25 each. But there's other go-again options that you could consider, right? You could run Rune Rager Swarm, and I'm sure other things. But Rune Rager Swarm being the main one. Like, E-Strike's just kind of filler. It's not necessary. Again, I'd rather, if you're going to spend your money, you spend it on the other key cards of the deck. However, Enlightened Strike goes into, like, these go into a lot of decks. That's why they go into every deck. That's why they're so expensive. Unfortunately, you just have to have Felling, and you just have to have Plow Under. They're just too good to cut. But these other ones, I think, are much more flexible. Yeah, Bramble Spark. Great thing to say. Yeah, that's like 3 cents, and you could add those. And it basically does the same thing. It allows you to convert 5-card hands, and that's the whole point. Okay. Is that the last slide? That's the last slide. Well, that's Florian. He's pretty neat, honestly, and a lot of people like playing him. I liked playing him a lot more than I thought. I also think that when Mistveil heroes start to rotate out, Florian starts to get a lot better. You're going to see a lot more Rosetta, I think, once things like Enigma start to go. He's poised to do pretty well. He's got a lot of options. He's got a really deep card pool. He does a very inherently powerful thing. So yeah, that's Florian. Hope you guys enjoyed this guide. Let me know in the comments what hero you want to see next. I got a couple in mind, but I'm interested to see what you guys want to hear. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. See you next time.